Hello, I'm really excited to introduce you to our next guest, Debbie Goldstein. I met Debbie actually while I was studying on the Harvard program on negotiation, and Debbie was one of the lecturers on the course. Her energy and her experience and style of communication just captured me. So I'm really, really pleased to bring her to our podcast today to share her learnings and to share her insights with us. She's one of those rare people who has her feet in both camps. Not only is she a lecturer and understands the academic frameworks, but she also runs her own business. She's a co-founder of Triad Consulting Group. So I'll waste no more time and introduce you to Debbie Goldstein, and I think Debbie deserves one of these. Looking forward to a great conversation. Hello and welcome to another edition of Empathy at the Table. For those of you who can't see me because you're listening on Spotify, I'm smiling from ear to ear. I'm really excited to introduce our next guest. Debbie Goldstein, I met her at Harvard University. She was one of my professors teaching me negotiation at Harvard University. And this is a really great honor and a pleasure to welcome Debbie Goldstein to Empathy at the Table. Hello, Debbie. How are you?
Oh, I'm so delighted to be here, Tony. You were a standout star student among a room of 150 people. You were insightful and memorable, and so I'm so delighted to be here.
Oh, that's wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. So for our listeners that maybe haven't heard of you and who are intrigued to know a bit more about you, could you just introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah. So I kind of have two jobs. So I co-run a leadership development firm called Triad Consulting, where we help leaders all over the world in all different industries navigate their hardest and most meaningful conversations. So negotiations, difficult conversations, feedback, influence, etc. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm also on the faculty of both Harvard Law School and at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, teaching negotiation. And then I also get to teach in executive education programs through the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School. So I have a lot of hats. I'm also a parent of two children, so I'm just, if I'm not good at juggling actually, but I've become quite good at juggling.
And negotiating, of course.
And negotiating, yes, also, yes. And putting everything into use, trying to really walk the talk.
Yeah, well, actually, that was going to be my first question, because I think, rather like me, you're a rare breed of practitioner who has, your arm in academia with the teaching on the executive education, but you also run your own business. Why is that important to you to be able to have your feet in both camps?
Yeah, I actually think it's essential. So when I'm in the classroom with my graduate students or working with executives, I think having the actual experience of running a business, making hard decisions, negotiating with stakeholders and partners, having difficult and delightful clients is really important. I do a lot of executive coaching of CEOs, and so when I'm talking to them, I'm not just talking from an academic or like I'm hearing you, but it's like, oh, I've been there. I have had to make very similar decisions. And so I think that really matters when I'm talking to on my Harvard end of things. When I'm with my clients, I think it brings a lot of credibility that I get to teach at Harvard with some of the brightest minds from all over the world. I mean, we get executives who are CEOs from literally every country on the planet bringing their hardest negotiations and conversations. And of course, what is so heartening to see is it does not matter if you're in Denmark or Dubai, but we all just navigate the same human condition. And so having that sort of academic slant where we think and create new theory means I can bring the latest and the best thinking when I'm with my corporate clients. So they both really marry each other. It also means I'm just learning about the world and surrounded by truly the smartest people in the world all the time. And who doesn't want to do that? I mean, I'm really the luckiest person.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. And so when you're structuring your negotiation classes, is there a difference between how you would put it together for, say, like an executive MBA or somebody at Harvard versus someone who is in the cold front of negotiating in a corporate company?
Yes, the short answer to that is yes. So so I feel like in my life I'm operating on multiple levels at the same time, and one of the things I'm constantly doing is really trying to understand the person and the audience that I'm in front of, and so that whatever I'm doing is tailored to what would be helpful to them. So I'm not thinking, it's sort of the difference of like, who are you centering? I'm not centering myself as this person who, at this point, because I'm kind of older in years, have, 25 plus years of experience. That's not who I'm centering. I'm centering whoever's in front of me, and I'm listening to them, hearing what are your pain points? Where do you struggle? Right? I'm often talking to people at the most senior levels of their organizations, and they have this added sense of like, I actually should be good at all of this. I should feel totally confident and expert in all of this, but I do struggle. And I'm like, yes, because that is human. And so I destigmatize that you should be good at everything, and I really try to invite those pain points, and I try to meet people where they are. So even, I was on the phone this morning with two different clients who are struggling with very, very different things, and then very sort of, shared things. And I really customize what I'm offering based on what is helpful. Now, when I'm in a exec ed culture or climate, obviously we have a whole diversity of experiences, industries, geographies, etc. So I offer something that I think will be sort of foundationally helpful broadly to everyone. But I do very much think about who I'm centering, and it's always the person in front of me, which I think really aligns with how you think about empathy at the table, right? I'm always operating from an empathetic lens when I'm teaching, and frankly, when I'm negotiating.
Yeah, I mean, so the whole idea behind the podcast and the work I do, which is emotionally intelligent negotiation, is to look at negotiation through the lens of what's going on under the table, right? The hidden side of negotiation. But I find that there are two kind of major camps. There's those, what I call the old schoolies, who have been negotiating for years, and they're fantastic negotiators. But a lot of the success of the negotiation is built around how much money did you come away with, right? How much money did you leave on the table versus how much money did you take off the table? And I think it is very, very important. But I'm not convinced that's the only metric to measure a successful negotiation. And one of the things that I loved about what you were teaching at Harvard was there was more, it's more to it. There were other ways to measure successful negotiations. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I'll say a few things. So first of all, I think to your point, the sort of old school style of negotiation, and some people are very good at that, and exactly, they walk away with, if there's sort of a fixed pie, maybe they've walked away with, a larger portion of that fixed pie. But I also think, and this is especially true when I'm working with people who do bring more experience, more years of experience, is you have a lot of experience, which is great. You have a lot of experience making the same mistakes over and over again, which is which is not great. Like that's some of what we're trying to do is the unlearning. And in our view, would you rather have a fixed portion of a pie that's this big, quite small, or would you rather have maybe a smaller proportional piece, but a smaller piece of a pie that's this big? It's so big you can't see it on the screen right now with what I'm doing with my hands. And so a lot of what we're thinking about is, how do you not just leave a single negotiation and be like, well, I got more in that, but how do you look back at that negotiation? And in research settings, what we have found is that almost all the time, people can look back, if they take the time to reflect, and see that they've left value on the table. That actually, if they had been more curious, shared more information, ascertained more information from the other side, thought more creatively about how to meet the interests, what each side really cares about, that actually you each probably could have done better.
Yeah.
Or one of you could have done better without making the other worse off. So there's a way in which, if you come in with a scarcity mindset that there is this much and we've got to figure out who gets how much of this much, versus an abundance mindset, which says if we're both really smart, which I'm going to presume we are, if we can understand what we each care about and get quite creative in our option generation, we can each walk away with much more because there's abundance that we didn't even know was possible at the beginning. But that is definitely a mindset that you need to, that we encourage people to have when you enter the negotiation.
And I find with certainly with some clients, I find that mindset, the scarcity mindset, the competitive mindset, can be quite pervasive, and it actually starts from the top down. How do you come across this, number one? And if you do, how do you challenge it? How do you deal with that?
Oh, I mean, we come across it all the time. So, the way that we navigate it in, workshop settings or in academic settings is we actually do exercises. So you got to experience, we do a lot of role plays and exercises, which of course when people walk in are like, oh, role play, and they roll their eyes. But these exercises and role plays are not meant to be silly or frivolous. They're actually meant to help you unlock in your mind a different way to think about things so that then when you're actually facing your real life negotiations, you can transfer that new way of thinking to those situations. So we often will start programs doing an exercise that one's as simple as like an arm wrestling exercise where you ask people to close their eyes, play a game where they're sort of partnering up with someone where it looks like they're arm wrestling, and you tell them that you get a point when the other person's hand hits the back of the table. So you're describing, without using the word arm wrestling, you're describing arm wrestling. And what you say is you want to get as many points for yourself as possible. Close your eyes. You have 15 seconds. Go. And what I can see, because my eyes are opened, is many people around the room are just locked in this battle of arm wrestling. But the people who really think about the question and really think about the prompt, which is the goal is to get as many points for myself as possible. That doesn't mean that you, Tony, don't also get a lot of points. But the people who, quote unquote, win are not those that are locked in battle and maybe get 1 point from their partner. They're people who say, even with their eyes closed, no talk. Oh, also no talking. No talking is that they do this. They go back and forth. My arm hits the table, your arm hits the table. My arm hits the table, your arm hits the table. So then by the end of 15 seconds, we've each gotten 20 points, which is a hell of a lot more than the people who were locked in battle and maybe got 1 point. So some of these, what seem in the moment like silly exercises, just unlock this notion of a competition or a scarcity mindset versus more of a collaborative or abundant mindset. So I have a theory that negotiation is actually a problem-solving device. That's a very different, the language is different, the mindset is different than if you call it a competition.
Right.
A game. Some people call it a game. I don't call it a game because a game connotes that there's a win-lose.
Yeah.
If it's a problem-solving mechanism, it's like, right, what we're here together is to solve a problem together.
Right.
And if you do well and I do well, that just means we're both happy. It also means that our reputations are intact so that when someone talks about you, Tony, I'm like, oh no, Tony's a fair dealer. You want to negotiate with Tony.
Yeah.
And when someone talks about me, hopefully they're saying something similar. Who knows? Yeah. So I think part of it too is this idea that negotiations aren't an event. They're a part of a series of a relationship. There's a part of what informs our reputation, and all of that matters because we want to be someone that you want to negotiate with me again. I think that's hugely beneficial because oftentimes we are going to bump into each. Look at this, right?
Yeah.
3 years later, we're sitting in a ballroom in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at a beautiful hotel in an executive education setting, and now here we are. And I'm a guest on your incredible podcast, which I had the benefit of listening to some of the back episodes, which were just delightful. So
thank you very much. Thank you. There's so much to unpack here. So you unlock using role plays to unlock a different way of thinking. I love that. Because I have come across resistance to role play, and I think sometimes the resistance is because people attach their identities to how they show up. Right? And so they think they're going to be judged. They think they're going to be vulnerable. And so they don't want to do that. So they hide behind this, I don't want to do role plays because it's silly. But really, I think, if you reframe it with the idea that, yes, of course, we're unlocking parts of your brain that, you know, almost rewiring parts of your brain, and that's bound to feel uncomfortable. And you might translate that into feeling silly or any other verb or any other adjective. So I also would like to know, when you are, let's say you're in front of a customer or you're in front of a potential client, what do you do with the emotional side of things? Right? One thing is the strategy, and we know what the strategy is and how to make sure that we have the frameworks. But then you might be feeling nervous about the outcome. You might be feeling nervous about the process. You might be feeling anxious or whatever. So how do you address the emotions that are actually running things in the background?
Yeah, I love this. So the first thing I do for myself is I try to have awareness of what's happening for me. So in this moment, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm a little nervous. I want to show up well. I want Tony to feel like this is a good use of time and that I'm showing up well for you. And so noticing that and just naming it for myself. I don't always name it out loud. But having that moment just to be like, oh yeah. And if I'm feeling nerves, for me, that's a good sign. That means I care. Right? If I'm not feeling any nerves, it means I'm empathetic. It means like I'm not really thinking about it. So that's there. At the table, I might reframe the kind of emotional piece to say something like, I think we both just really care about what's about to happen here. Like, I care deeply about this. I imagine you do too. To just sort of enter in naming that this is something that matters to us. And so there's likely going to be emotion. When I feel something in the moment, if I'm upset or surprised, I will try to use like words like, oh, that's really surprising. I need a beat. I need a moment to think about that. Because I have found, and that's really come with growth. I would say if you saw me 20 years ago, I would just be fumbling. I would be sweating. I would be using a lot of word salad. But now I'm much more comfortable
Did you say word salad?
Word salad. Have you heard that phrase? It just means
I haven't.
a lot of words coming out that actually don't make that much sense. And
Love it. Yeah.
So I'll say, I'm surprised. Can I just have a minute to absorb that or to think through that? And I'm much more comfortable asking for the time. If I see someone getting emotional, I will note it for myself. And particularly if there's anger, which, you know, to be honest, in very high stakes and stressful negotiations, there often can be. I do something which sounds sort of silly, but I sort of notice it, immediately remind myself it's not about me. It's about their feeling incredibly stressed, which offers me some empathy towards them because they're feeling stressed because of the situation, because of the pressures from their own boss or stakeholder, etc. And then when it comes at me, I don't let it hit me and penetrate me because I'm actually quite a sensitive person. In my head, I don't actually do this physically because that would feel a little weird in a negotiation, but I metaphorically like put my hand in front of me and like catch it as if it's like a ball of fire coming towards me. I catch it and then I just sort of place it on the ground next to me. I just sort of catch it. So I don't let it hit me because I am someone that if it hits me, I will be knocked off balance. I will not be at my skillful self. I will react in ways that I don't intend to or want to. And sometimes I'll just say, oof, what's going on what's going on for you? Because it feels like we're having a moment. Like I'll ask a question. I won't say, you seem angry or you seem bitter or you seem,
seems like.
Yeah. Because, people, the best way to get people mad is to be like, you seem mad.
Yeah.
So
Of course I'm mad.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll say, why don't we just check in? Like, what's going on for you here? I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling stuck. What's happening for you? To just sort of pause it and give space for it. And sometimes you're like, no, I'm fine. I'm like, great, let's keep going then.
I think what you've demonstrated here is the idea of empathy and emotional intelligence. Sometimes people equate that with being weak and supplicative and all kind of wishy-washy. But what you've just you demonstrated is, number one, the bravery it takes to say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit nervous now, or, I really want this to work. That's a brave statement. And also it's quite courageous as well to make a mini hypothesis about what you think is going on, and then say it, and put yourself in a position where the other person might actually say, no, you're completely wrong, but that's okay. And so how do you express, or how do you, what reflections do you have when people assume that being empathetic or emotionally intelligent means being weak and less assertive?
Yeah, so it's funny. This is something I run into so often, particularly with my graduate students.
Yeah.
Who have the sense, and they often say this, of like, what I hope to get out of this course is I hope to be like strong and assertive and like not be emotional.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, don't do that. Like that, don't do that. I want you to be totally authentically yourself, and if you are someone who experiences emotion, I want you to do that. So one thing I try to do is model. I try to model like I try to use humor, I'm loose, I'm vulnerable, so I'm modeling just that how I show up is totally enough and good, and I am kind, and I am not weak. And I will often say that in an introduction, particularly if I'm feeling like they think that they're getting the better of me. I'll say, listen, I'm incredibly kind. I have a real abundance mindset. Generosity is important to me, but please don't equate my kindness for weakness, to be clear. And I'll get a little sort of shorter or sharper in my tone to just demonstrate that I am not just here to be nice. I am here to be effective. And for me, kindness is just a core value of how I operate in the world, how I show up. I'm not saying you all have to show up that way, but this is how I show up in the world, which then invites each of you to show up authentically as you are. And some people are like, oh, I wish I could have that. I just don't. I'm like, have what you have. Like, I'm not trying to make you in the image of me either. But I think that, I think the other thing, of course, when I have students over the course of a longer period, is they see themselves in their own results, that them showing up as themselves, asking a lot of questions, being curious, understanding the other side, caring about what the other side is interested in, and then they also get their own needs met and they get good results in their negotiation simulations. That also is like a sign to them of like, oh, actually, this can be successful for me. So part of it is, and as I was listening to some of your other guests, they said similar things. I'm going to show up authentically as myself, but I'm also, negotiation's a dance, and I want to dance a collaborative, great dance. But if you want to dance, the samba, and I'm trying to waltz, okay, I can samba, I can dance that. Yeah. Oh, you want to do merengue? Okay, I can do that too. Like I'm agile and facile in lots of different ways to be, so that you don't think you're going to sort of get one over on me.
I like that.
But I'm going to still be me through it all.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the key, is to let them know that there's a choice. I'm choosing to go this way, but if you choose to go the other way, then that's okay. I'll meet you where you're at. But essentially, what we're looking to do is this, and however we get there, that's okay, because you and I both care about the outcome, right? And then you can move on from there.
Yes. I also think a lot about purpose, like just to build on what you just said, I think a lot about purpose and sort of naming that up front. Like, I think our purpose here in this conversation is to hopefully reach an outcome that feels really good for both of us. Let's construct a conversation that allows us to do that. But we'll see. And what it means when you set that up front is that, conversations, as they do, go left, right, center, up, down, sort of they meander. So that if we're getting in a stuck spot, I can remind both. I can say like, oh, so I thought, I just want to check in. Like, I think we were hoping to try to find some common ground. It feels like we're kind of stuck in a back and forth. I wonder if we want to kind of reset. So it's just setting that ballast at the beginning allows you to revisit it if you're getting stuck later. Which
I think on purpose here. That's a nice line. So you're in a negotiation. You build great rapport with your counterparts. Everything's going really well, and now you talk price. You talk money. Money comes into it, and suddenly things start to go south.
Sure.
Is that familiar? Is that a familiar
I mean,
scenario?
yeah, this is why many people sign up to take the course right here. You're naming the
Right.
top spot. Yes.
Right. What insights do you have around how to handle that?
Well, so the first insight I would have is to have done as much preparation before you get to this point
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
possible, right? And I don't just mean, I think a lot of people, when they do preparation for a negotiation in the simplest terms, come in with what they call their bottom line, which we would call in the vernacular the reservation value, sort of the most I'd be willing to pay, the least I'd be willing to accept. We sort of like, it'd be like, that's our preparation.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, do that, but that is insufficient. You should come in with your reservation value. You should also think about your aspiration value. Like what is your reasonably, but like most you could hope for, most or least you might pay. And then really importantly, this is one of the fundamental principles in at least the theory of negotiation that I ascribe to, is you want to think about something that we call criteria, which are objective standards of what is something, because it speaks to what is something that we could, a standard that lives outside of the will of you and me, that we could both look to and feel like, yeah, that's fair. So look at what did similar companies get sold for in a similar situation, a similar geography, a similar sort of economic moment. What do similar people get paid in this role, in this geography, etc. So if you what do houses go in a similar market of a similar size and a similar makeup. So having a sense of what our standards we can look to meets the very fundamental interest that every single person on the planet, I don't care who you are, I don't care if you're 2 or 102, that we all have, which is we want to be treated fairly. The idea of feeling taken or had, or that we someone's taking advantage of us, feels just so bad. And so this idea of having standards that we can look at is really helpful. So you want to do all that before you get to the table, is looking at standards. And the internet plus minus, but the beauty of the internet is that there's just a lot more information that you can gather that you weren't able to do before. The car industry has completely been flipped on its head because historically there were just information asymmetries because car dealers and manufacturers held so much information that you couldn't easily find. The internet has totally flipped that. So now there's total information sharing. So that's before you get to this moment. Once you're at this moment, I think you can actually do one of two things. You can either use the criteria, share the criteria that you're looking at and that you have gathered to say, so here's just some of the range of what I have found to be fair based on these, standards that I think are appealing and reasonable to and resonant to you as well. But let's look at those. Or, so one is to present your criteria. The other is to ask a question and just say, literally, help me understand where that number comes from. Help me understand where did you get it? How do you make it up? And if they just keep throwing it at me, I'll say, so help me, how would I justify that to my stakeholder? How would I justify that number to my, boss or client or partner, etc.? So those are just two ways that we navigate. I mean, we could do hours and hours on this topic. But those are just some of the things that I would think about as we talk about price or money or, numerical terms.
It always amazes me how that simple question, just so that I know, how did you arrive at that price? The whole pack of cards comes falling down because they hadn't done the benchmarking, they haven't done the homework, and so the price is really just a gut feeling. And you can normally tell by their reaction if they get defensive or they shut down. And that's what happens in negotiations, because they start to take that personally. Whereas if you've done the benchmarking, as you've explained, then you've taken the criteria. It's not in your hands. This is what's publicly available. And based on that, this is how I've made my judgment. That's very good. I've got loads of questions just firing at, coming at a rate of not.
We can do a part 2, Evelyn.
Yeah, we must do. So, what I teach also at ESA Business School, and so I work with founders who are scaling up their companies and also executive education. And I'd like to hear your view on this, because what I'm finding now, which is different, I've been teaching for maybe 15 years now. What I've noticed in the last maybe 5 years that I hadn't seen before is there is a real desire now for leaders to really want to kind of connect now, really want to not, I don't know what it is. Maybe they feel that the old school approach is maybe falling apart at the seams, and there must be another paradigm, a new way of being able to collaborate with people, with partners, and build relationships. I don't know, are you experiencing this?
I mean, you can see I'm like nodding my head like a bobblehead and lighting up. Yes. So I think there is, I don't know if it's a generational difference. I don't know if we're coming out of post-COVID. There's so many variables. I don't know where to tie it to. But the short answer is yes, I am seeing the same thing, that there is almost a demand. In fact, I recently just did a 360 for a very senior leader, where one of the components was people want to know you better. Like the knowability, the connective, being connected to you and knowing you as a whole person, not just as a executive leader who has deep expertise in the work that we do, but actually knowing you really matters. And I think that we're all looking, not to get a little philosophical, but I would just say, I think we're all looking for meaning and connection in the world. And I think there's this awakening that like we actually spend a lot of time at work, probably more time at work than we do with our loved ones. And so if we're going to be devoting that time and energy and brain power to our work, we want to feel like it's a place that we are known and that others are knowable. And this is a real paradigm shift. So I mean, this is an experience I've had with many senior leaders I've worked with, of like, what do you mean I have to share more of me? And I'm like, you do. And like, and you also have to care more about the people that work with you. So no, it's the exact same thing.
That's encouraging. I saw something yesterday. I need to do a bit more of a deeper research into it. But for the last 10 years, Oxford Press have been doing this research with young children. I think they're the age between 6 and 8. And every year they publish the word of the year. And they ask them, and they do research, they talk to them, and they kind of get an idea as to what the zeitgeist is of that age. And they've been doing it for 10 years. And the word for 2020, I think it's 25 or 24, but the latest word that's come out is kindness. And they were saying that it's so beautiful to see that the children of the age of between 6 and 8, these are the words that are on their mind. This is where they're thinking. They think the world needs more kindness. And they interviewed a couple of these kids, and they were, I mean, I was amazed to see an 8-year-old talking about the power of empathy. And when somebody falls down in the playground, instead of running past them, to stop and ask them, the questions. And this is across the board. So the study said that this is a great sign of what's, further down the line. And companies, organizations and governments would do well to jump on the bandwagon and make sure that, people like you, Debbie, and myself, who have been pitching this for years and years, get a chance to really show the power of what can happen when people get together. And instead of competing for priorities, we start trying to collaborate to make things happen.
Oh, I could not agree more, because I really think, just to build on what you just said, I just think kindness is the best, but also kindness equals more. Kindness equals greater opportunity. Kindness equals we can all be better. And I know for some people in the capitalist system, do better. So it's not a weakness. It's not like, oh, I can be strong and do really well or be kind. It's like, no, it all sort of builds together. So yes, no, I could not agree. Could not agree more.
And let's be very clear. Kindness is not weakness, as you said. Kindness is the ability to also look somebody in the eye and say, you're being outright obtuse, and my answer to you is no, right? That's being kind. You're being kind to yourself, and you're being kind to the other person. So I really, want to make it clear for listeners who are listening and think we're advocating for everybody to start being softies in their negotiations. That's not what we're saying, right, Debbie?
No, I mean, there's a thought leader and prolific author who has a wonderful podcast too, named Brene Brown, and she has a very simple phrase, which I'm sure you've heard, which is clear is kind.
Yes.
So very much, I actually think a lot of organizations and people think kindness and avoidance sort of go together, but it's the opposite. I think clarity with empathy is the kindest thing you can do. If someone has feedback for me, I don't want them to be talking about me and triangulating that information. I want them to share it with me. The kindest thing is to give it to me,
right,
so that I can decide what, so I'm knowing, right? It's probably something I wasn't aware of. So I'm knowing of it, and then I can decide what to do with it to try to improve. I don't want you talking about me. That's not kind, right? Yeah. Kind is actually giving it to me directly. So yes, I could not agree more.
Debbie, we are coming towards the end, but there is a question I did want to ask you, because when I was researching you, I saw that, maybe I'm wrong, so correct me if maybe I didn't see this correctly, but you're a jazz singer?
Yeah, yes, was. I would say former life. My children will cut me off very quickly if I start singing now, which I do all the time in the house. And in the car. Yes, I graduated from college not quite knowing what I wanted to do, but having a real interest in being a vocalist. And I thought, here, if I'm ever going to do it, let's just try to do it. So I lived in Chicago for a few years, and I had a few wonderful long-standing gigs and sang jazz, and then quickly realized that sometimes when you make your avocation your vocation, you start to resent it. And so then I went to law school.
I can see the connection.
So I still have a love for it. I actually was in a band in law school, but with life and work and kids, my singing is typically at friends' weddings and in the car these days.
Awesome. And you didn't want to be a lawyer?
No, I did not want to be a lawyer. I wanted to help people. And I went to law school a little bit by default of kind of not knowing what I wanted to do, but thinking, lawyers can help people. And then I took a mediation course in law school, and it just completely unlocked the world that I'm now in of now, how do you help resolve conflict? And so I'm totally indebted that I have a law degree and that I went to law school. I've never practiced law one day of my life because turns out I did not want to be a lawyer, but work with lawyers all the time and really have so much respect for the profession, and of course teach future lawyers at Harvard Law School. And it was able to use my law degree to meet the interest I had, which is to help people. So now I help people have their hardest conversations and resolve their toughest conflicts.
Wow. And why do you think that the Harvard program is so successful?
So there are several programs that are successful. I never want to say that we are the only or the best, but I do think, so the one I'm most familiar with, so I will speak to it. I think there's a lot of really congruence, trying to walk our talk, which is learning, which is curiosity, which is empathy, which is growth, which is abundance mindset. I think that the program operates on that level. So I've been teaching at Harvard for, I think, 15 years now. And people often say to me, like, but it must be so easy. You just plug and play your syllabus. And I'm like, oh no, we change our syllabus every single year because there's new stuff that we're learning. There are topics that we haven't covered around identity and power and things that really matter to people that weren't in the syllabus 15 years ago, but are now a cornerstone of what we teach. So part of what I think makes the teaching we do at Harvard so successful is that we are willing to experiment and innovate, meet people where they are, and again, really center, just to go back to something I said earlier, center the learner and what will help people as they take what we think are invaluable skills into their work and personal lives and hopefully do great things with them.
Debbie, I'm sure there will be some listeners who want to know what are you working on right now and how they can contact you. Would you
Yes,
please share your
delightful.
details?
Yes, I'd be so delightful. So it's delighted to do so. So I'm on LinkedIn. Apparently, there's a realtor also named Debbie Goldstein. But if you put in Debbie Goldstein Harvard, I'm pretty sure I'm the only one. So LinkedIn or the organization that I co-run is Triad Consulting Group, and we're so happy to either just answer questions or be in contact if there are ways we can help people. I am always working on writing projects. I'm working on a couple of articles right now. There's a book that's been in my mind forever that I'm working on. But particularly, I'm quite interested in the idea, you sort of raised it earlier actually, of good no's. Like, what is a good no versus a bad yes? Because I think a lot of people think
Ooh,
yes is right, yes is what you want. But the idea of a good no and how do you discern is something I've been thinking quite a bit about. And there's stuff tangentially on this topic, but nothing quite what I'm thinking about writing about now. So stay
wow.
tuned.
Will you come back and talk to us about that when you?
I would be so happy. Yes, more good no's, fewer bad yeses.
Debbie Goldstein, thank you for joining us on Empathy at the Table. It's been a super pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Be well.